Marshall and Paul with the call. Take it away, you guys.
Thanks, Maria. And yes, it is me, Marshall. It is him, Paul, and we do have the call. We've got mega stakes in round 15. We always do, right? There's always top 8 implications, and sometimes there's more. And today, we've got more, especially when you look at Stefan Schütz. He is carrying a massive load. The upside for a victory for him is potentially huge. We're talking top 8 at this tournament and potentially a seat at the World Championship. He's looking good for both of those with the win. Not quite at that hard lock point. Remember, these players are sitting at 10-4. You need 12 wins to be an absolute lock. But it's worth noting here, Paul, that Stefan overnight was one of our 7-0 players. And that means that his tiebreakers are actually very good. So if he wins, he'll be at 11-4 and tied with a number of other people. Some of them will make top 8, some of them won't. He could easily be one of them.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Going into this last round, typically you will have a couple of people who may have picked up that 12th win. Only David Inglis. David Inglis was the one who absolutely locked his spot into the top 8. Everybody else is playing, right?
That's right.
So there's all kinds of tiebreaker math that we can get into at some point later. But the big thing here is Stefan is playing one of the most important matches of his life, probably the most important match of his life. Let's be real here, right?
Definitely.
This has Worlds implications and top 8 implications. Like you mentioned, started out 7-0, has great tiebreakers, having a bit of a rough day here, 3-4 on the day. But despite all of that, because of his great start yesterday, if he wins here, really great shot at the double qualification.
That's right. Now, on the other side of the table is his teammate, Karl Sarap, and Karl's also playing for a lot. Now, we're not going to pile quite as much on his shoulders as he did here for Stefan, but top 8 is still in sight for Karl. Karl has middle-of-the-pack tiebreakers, which means with a win and an 11th victory, he will definitely be in the conversation right on that border between getting, 7th, 8th, or maybe 9th, 10th, somewhere in that range. So this is a huge win for him. And let's not forget, if you make it to top 8, you are then 1 win away on Sunday, which you get 2 cracks at to try to get top 6, and that is also a World Championship seat. So make no mistake, this is not all on one side. It's just mostly on one side for Stefan Schütz. Underway here, Paul, we see a pair of Esper Sentinel as well as Ranger Captain of Eos on one side, Cauldron Familiar, Gilded Goose, and a Ravenous Squirrel on the other. So both decks kind of doing their thing.
Yeah, definitely. And Karl, with that collected company, that's going to be big. But Stefan also with one of the most important cards in the matchup, which is the Meat Hook Massacre. We saw it do a lot of work, but all hope is not lost. We did see Simon Nielsen actually defeat Golgari Food. That might have been the only win we've seen against Food. But just by overloading the board with such a dominating board presence and then utilizing Ranger Captain of Eos's secondary text ability, target player cannot play a spell for your turn, which actually bought him just enough time to prevent Zach Keeney from casting Meat Hook Massacre. So that's the play pattern that you might also see here. So keep an eye on that Ranger Captain of Eos, because Karl will be able to generate a giant board here. That's just what this deck does, right?
That's right. And look at this. A collected company combat trick potentially here from Karl Sarap. He did get some blocks, Cauldron Familiar and Gilded Goose, but it looks like it's going to be Thalia and another Ranger Captain, where he was probably looking for, I don't know, Thalia's Lieutenant.
Right. Lieutenant would have been big here. Now, the Thalia is still pretty decent here, right? Because it does mean that Meat Hook Massacre will cost 1 more mana.
And he needs to get up to 3, yeah.
And kind of awkward, because the Thalia is in play, can't play that Deadly Dispute.
Huh. So he's going to have to settle for making a food token with Gilded Goose before going to his turn.
And now we're looking at 5 potential mana this turn, which means you can Meat Hook Massacre for 2. Not enough to get the Ranger Captains off the battlefield.
Yeah, 3's the number here.
Right? And Karl, of course, very aware of the fact that that is the thing that he needs to be mindful of, right? knowing that Stefan can't play the meat hook for 3 this turn, not choosing to sacrifice the Ranger Captain, could potentially see it next turn. But right now, I mean, he doesn't have the most imposing board, right?
Right.
That often happens with the aid of something like Athalia's Lieutenant, which Karl has not found yet.
Yeah, so Stefan's going to pass the turn back over. He does have Deadly Dispute. You know, you could see something like a chump block and then a dispute with the Squirrel, something along those lines to keep the mana flowing for him and to set up for this big Meat Hook Massacre next turn. Now, he does need to keep Gilded Goose on the battlefield if he's going to make that play, though, because that is one of his mana sources.
And a heads-up thing that Karl set up several turns ago was using the Ranger Captain of Eos and searching out a Giant Killer, right? Mm-hmm. Searching out the Giant Killer, well aware of the fact that one of the most problematic threats in this matchup is a giant Ravenous Squirrel that's left unchecked.
Now, this one's just the right size. As you see, a nice little play here from Stefan. He's going to go block, but the Ravenous Squirrel is a 2/2. Is going to go on Thalia. Then Deadly Dispute will
However,
get it to 3/3, but there's a response.
There's an Iganjo, right?
That's right.
So
Seat of the Empire. And it's even a little cheaper here thanks to Thalia. That means that Ravenous Squirrel is going to soak up 4. But the good news for Stefan is he still has his backup plan with the Meat Hook Massacre. The bad news is he was hoping to keep a Squirrel after that.
Right. And so this Squirrel, there's no way to save it, right? Because you can return to Cauldron Familiar, but that'll only turn it into a 4/4. Yep. Right? And Thalia also has First Strike.
Right.
So, I mean, you would need to find a way to grow that into a 7/7 to have it live.
Yeah, this was just his way to get Thalia off the battlefield and keep the Squirrel post-Massacre, but now he just is going to have to Massacre.
Right, and
for the full amount.
We can Massacre for 3. I wonder if Karl is just going to just play the game of, look, I just hope you don't have the Meat Hook Massacre, or can he afford to sack the Ranger Captain? I mean, Stefan's at 16,
yes.
Right? So
giving up a 3/3 is a big deal for sure.
Right. Yeah, is that even enough pressure, right? I think maybe you just have to just kind of go, hey, all right, if you're going to hook me, you're going to hook me.
Yeah, because if he did do that, he would have himself a 3/3 and a 2/1 and then 2 1-powered creatures. So not a super fast clock from Sarap. And right now his hand is a little weak, right? He's got a redundant Thalia and he's got a Giant Killer that doesn't really have a target right now.
Yeah, I feel like you want a Meat Hook because Karl's actually given you the opportunity this turn to cast Meat Hook, right? Because if Karl, let's say, finds an Inquisitor Captain into Athalia's Lieutenant, next turn, you bet he's going to sacrifice that Ranger Captain of Eos.
That's right. All right, so there's Esper Sentinel triggering. And it looks like it's going to get paid for, too. So Stefan really managing resources as best as possible here. You see Karl responding with Ranger Captain of Eos sacrifices, though clearly those were just going to die anyway, which is why he did it, save the life gain.
Yeah, to save the triggers from the Meat Hook Massacre. And, rebuilding here.
Okay, hey, that's the one, right? Because before we pass it over, it was going to be Thalia. That was it. Now there's some more business here, and he's got a board state now. Look at this. Thalia, Ranger Captain of Eos, and Esper Sentinel all in a row, and boom, built right back up again. And the ball's back in Stefan Schütz's court. He needs to find ways to interact once again.
Unclear that this is going to be enough, though, right? This is still not enough because we have Cat Oven. Cat Oven is online. You could run out the... and you can safely just block the Ranger Captain of Eos. You're only taking 2 damage a turn here because of the drain effect on the Cauldron Familiar.
You know what I'm thinking, Paul? A little Trail of Crumbs.
Yeah,
the engine
Trail
running.
of Crumbs.
Okay, overgrown farmland off the top here for Sarap's not going to help his cause. And here comes the attack with the team. But as you mentioned, Familiar can come back in, jump in front of the 3/3 Ranger Captain. And that just means 2 damage gets through to Stefan, but he gets to offset that by gaining a life from the Familiar, and it's just not a real clock right now.
Right, and this is where, I mean, Cauldron Familiar, of course this interaction is extremely powerful, but we've seen a lot of Food versus Is It Phoenix matchups where the Familiar can't realistically block, but in this matchup, right?
Great
I mean, the
blocker.
Food deck, it's just all ground creatures.
Another Gilded Goose. He also has Soul Guide Lantern. It's being taxed by Thalia, but he could get a card out of that at some point. Oh, and look at this. Luris is going to go into hand. And
might just choose to wait to get the value on the Luris because Skyclave Apparition is a thing.
So rather than having it exposed, he can cast it and then cast a spell from his graveyard straight away.
Right. You want to get at least one spell off of the Luris.
There's a Collected Company, though, for Karl. That's exactly the type of card he needs to draw at this point to push him back in the lead.
Draw.
Yeah, right now, you'd give the lead a little bit to Stefan, but a Collected Company could change that very, very quickly. Ooh, more Thalias.
Okay.
There's a Thalia's Lieutenant and a Ranger Captain. That is exactly what he wanted to hit. And look at this.
Well, that...
Triggers abound. And what does he get with the Ranger Captain?
Just another Esper Sentinel.
Good enough. Now that's a board state, Paul.
It's slightly improved, I want to say. Right? slightly improved.
Yeah, Stefan went from taking 1 a turn to a lot more. Now he's being hit for 9. Called from
this turn, not so much,
thing,
but the next turn, right? The next turn, we're going to see a little bit more action. Interestingly enough, I think Stefan is still okay here. Just, again, Oven, Massacre, Familiar, extremely powerful. Stefan has access to a lot of mana, can generate food off the Goose, and then you're also going to see some extra value here from the Luris on top of that. Now,
go ahead.
Now, at some point, Stefan's going to want to find another Meat Hook Massacre here.
Right.
But he has some time. He has a few turns.
He's not under, such immense pressure that he's going to be done in 2 turns, but he does need to find some action. And let's see if he can do it. The Lantern can get him a card. Luris can, provide some value from his yard.
He's got a squirrel? Does he have a squirrel in there?
He does have a squirrel,
okay, yeah. And this will also make it so that it's going to be really hard to attack through. Now, of course, Stefan does know about the Giant Killer in Karl's hand.
But if he can keep his life total up, he can say, okay, kill my Giant. I'll just play it again.
Right.
Start building it up. I mean, it doesn't take long to get that Ravenous Squirrel huge when you have, Cauldron Familiar with Witch's Oven.
Yeah. The Giant Killer is just going to be a temporary solution, right? Because you can just get it back. So I think Stefan's going to return this cat, block. You can probably also go ahead and put that squirrel in front of something as well, right? You just go, it's going to be a 2/2. You can turn it into potentially a 4/4 here, maybe more, as you have a couple of Gilded Geese in play with the extra food tokens. And that's a crazy part, right? I mean, Karl just resolved Collected Company, got a Thalia's Lieutenant and a Ranger Captain, has 15 power on the board, and I think he's behind.
Crazy. He just had probably the best turn he could have hoped for, and still finds himself trying to fight through the board here from Stefan Schütz. Crazy how good this deck is.
And you can't play around, really. You just want to go for the block before it becomes 4 power, right? And then you're like, okay, if you want to use your Giant Killer, go for it. I'll just replay it next turn.
But you've got to block in, right? So you're not taking damage from that creature. I hate to say it, Paul, but we also have to make sure we keep an eye on Karl's life total, right? He's down to 9 here, and he's not going to be at 9 by the time it's back on Stefan's side.
You're absolutely correct.
Taking a lot of damage. Let's not forget, the Meat Hook Massacre is an enchantment. It's just sitting there doing a lot of damage. So a chump block and a hit from Thalia means 14 is the life total right now from Stefan, but down to 6.
Jeez. And you can even attack here with the Luris, right?
Can he just kill him here?
You Fatal Push the Esper Sentinel. Oh, man. Oh, right. And there's a Hive as well. This might just be lethal, yeah. Just attack with everything and just...
Rude.
Oh, my gosh.
And that is, in fact, game number 1 going to Stefan Schütz, who picks up the win. It looked like he was on cruise control the whole time, and that was not a bad draw from his teammate, Karl Sarap. So that is one step to glory here for Stefan Schütz. I can't imagine what's going through his mind. I feel like most of the time when you get in a position like this, you think about it before the match, and then once you start playing, you know, it's enough focus to just think about the cards and stuff and kind of sort out what it means later. But
Right.
it has to be in the back of his mind here, especially after a 7-0 start yesterday where your hopes get really high. You start to think about, okay, if I can put together a decent run, I might be able to top 8 this thing. Maybe I can put myself in a good spot on the challenger race for the world championship. Then he stumbles in day 2, right? He came into this round 10-4. That means he's lost 4 times just today, but he has a chance for redemption in this last round against his teammate. And now he is super close with a
So
game
close.
win under his belt. And that did not look difficult for him.
It did not. Now, the way that these matches play out, I mean, oftentimes the food deck will find a meat hook, right? And the way you beat that with this deck outside of the Ranger Captain is you just gotta power through it sometimes, right? We saw Simon Nielsen do that, where it's just like, look, I'm gonna draw a bunch of my 4-drops, all right? I'm gonna draw multiple companies, multiple Inquisitor Captains. Go ahead, you might have that one meat hook, but I'm gonna, if you can't find the second or third one, I can try to still just overpower the sweepers. It's a big ask, but that's kind of what it's going to take for Karl to come out ahead in this matchup.
Okay, well, Karl has land drop number 2 with a pair of 2-drops, make that 3 2-drops, and then he does, in fact, have the Inquisitor Captain as well as the Skyclave Apparition. So he has some good tools to do that first start, and we have to note here that Stefan does not see his Meat Hook Massacre just yet.
Right. Does have the Fatal Push for the Catilda here.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
That'll come in handy. Colony Garden for a free creature.
I feel like Thalia was also a reasonable consideration there.
No attack from the cat. No block either. Giant Killer gets in for 1.
Get a little scry here. Wants a land for the Inquisitor Captain.
He topped it, Paul, so we're going to assume that that's a land. And I bet you Stefan's going to assume the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so Thalia Guardian of Thraben on the battlefield now. And all of a sudden, Trail of Crumbs. The window for that has gotten a little tighter here. He had a really nice turn set up here with Trail and then a Gilded Goose that he happened to draw. But as it stands, he's going to have to choose between them.
Yeah.
Deadly Dispute, also an option, and it looks like the option that he's going to take here, Paul.
Yeah, probably just looking to get more mana on board, right?
Yes. Yeah, Corey was saying that's kind of one of the secrets to playing this type of deck, is you actually do need to really protect to make sure that you're hitting every land drop possible.
Yeah, and the
It's true for
treasure's
most
also
decks, but
also the treasure is extremely relevant, right? Because it
Yes.
allows you to power through the Thalia and cast a big enough Meat Hook Massacre to wipe the board. And that was a big turn here from Karl. Inquisitor Captain into Edeline. Big attack. And no immediate answer for that Edeline that's in play.
yeah, Stefan could also be considering that with the Deadly Dispute. Hey, I need to find Meat Hook Massacre at some point here sooner than later, and now he's got to find it quick. Looks like he's deciding on if he wants to block and then sack to Deadly Dispute, I assume.
He's definitely blocking. It's just a matter of deciding whether or not you want to block with the other creature.
I see.
Right? The Cauldron Familiar. I think that was probably the thing he was mostly considering.
Okay. He did, by the way. He traded off for
Hey!
a token and right on time. Now, it isn't
Not big
great
enough.
here, though, right? Okay.
But you can set up, right? You get the land, you play the land, and then you have a Gilded Goose as well. That's an extra point. That's an extra source of mana. So you go land number 4 this turn. Next turn you can drop land number 5. That plus the Goose plus the treasure means you can Meat Hook Massacre for 4 while also paying the tax on Thalia.
Just perfect timing for the Massacre to show up.
And I'll be curious to see if Karl does something like Skyclave Apparition to Gilded Goose or something to kind of keep
full
you
pedal
lower
to
on
the
mana.
metal. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of a why not trail of crumbs here for Stefan, who passes the turn back. And I'm curious to see this too. Does Karl play Skyclave Apparition? He did find a land as well, so he can play both of his creatures this turn. And this is a heck of a board. It's not quite lethal. It's 14 damage. Actually, 15 damage?
And I love this because with the land and now the fact that you play the Thalia's Lieutenant, your Inquisitor Captain is also protected from a Meat Hook Massacre for 3 because that's the biggest Meat Hook Massacre that Stefan can play next turn. Yes,
and Adeline now has 5 toughness as well. So this is going to get Stefan to 2 to 1? 8, 9.
Well, so we can return a familiar here.
Oh,
so
okay.
we can chump the Adeline and we'll take 10. So we'll go down to 9.
There you go.
Probably not going to pay 1 here is my guess.
At any rate, it's a non-lethal attack. But where does this leave Stefan? Does he have the ability to play a meaningful Meat Hook Massacre here?
So he can play a Massacre, wipe the board, Adeline and Inquisitor Captain will survive. However, Apparition will die, which means that Stefan will get a chump blocker, right? You will get a 1/1 token there, given that it's exiled the Goose. Now, he still is going to need to fight. I mean, don't get me wrong, this Massacre is amazing, right? Still going to have to fight through the Inquisitor Captain and the Adeline. But he has a 1/1 and he can return. He has a 1/1 and he can return a Cauldron Familiar.
He still has 1 food left over. Oh, and there's a Skyclave Apparition. It's not going to do it here. Yeah. Boy, he must have.
Yeah, not.
You can still cast it. You know, there's still targets over there.
And maybe that's just the play, just to keep on putting a little more pressure here. Of course, he just has a good enough attack here as is.
Yeah, this is a 2-turn clock. This is going to be big time pressure here on Stefan. What does Stefan need to do to get out of this? I mean, it feels like he's close.
He's extremely close. I mean, Stefan, I mean, look at his hand, right? Like, you got the squirrel, you can play a Trail of Crumbs. That Trail of Crumbs does get you back your Cauldron Familiar. And then there's also that active Meat Hook Massacre still.
Karl's at 13. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah, and a bit awkward here on drawing the second copy of Boseiju, because one is in play. Now the Skyclave Apparition, Karl holding it, will mean that he will be able to use this to get that squirrel off the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that doesn't get it done. That also doesn't get it done.
Finds a pair of lands here off of the trails.
Stefan will go up to 11. Skyclave Apparition on the squirrel. Actually, it might just be better to It might just be better to do the familiar because I believe the squirrel, especially with that lieutenant off the top, I think that squirrel just needs the chump block.
Yeah, that might be the case here, Paul, because right now Stefan doesn't have any way to sacrifice the squirrel since he's, the familiar since he's tapped out.
Yeah, it looks like it's probably. I think it's going to have to chump block the Adeline here. As the Adeline, if you play Thalia's Lieutenant and Apparition, it's going to have 7 power after you attack and make a token.
Yes.
Yeah, so heads up there.
Plus, yeah, and then the Inquisitor Captain's 4.
What a draw.
Wow. It's actually 5 for the Inquisitor Captain as well, so an easy chump block here for Stefan. So now what?
Meat Hook, Marshall.
Is it Meat Hook or death? Yeah.
It's always Meat Hook.
Oh, it's a Ravenous Squirrel that he found off the top. Does he have any other play here?
That is not enough.
Karl Sarap was able to apply the first wave and then keep just enough of it and apply the second wave, and it looks like that's going to be enough.
You got to power through that first Meat Hook most of the time.
That's right, and he did. It's interesting because the more pressure that you apply, the faster they have to feel compelled to deploy the Meat Hook to just not die. And in this case, that actually allowed 2 of Karl's creatures to survive it because Stefan didn't have time to wait until it was big enough to truly wipe the board, and that made the difference here.
Yeah, now if Stefan had infinite time, could have done something crazy like Boseiju, your Meat Hook Massacre, then play Luris and then replay it or something like that. But Of course, the humans that won't give you that kind of time. I can't imagine Stefan's going to survive this attack.
It sure doesn't look like it from here. There is a life linker, but...
There is a life linker. You take
Block,
7. Oh, no,
block.
you'll go to 1. You'll go to 1. You put
Yeah,
the squirrel
you're
in
right.
front of the Adeline, the Lurrus in front of the captain, and you go to 1.
But that Cave of the Frost Dragon in hand for Karl was
But
clutch.
Marshall. But Marshall. Meat Hook Massacre. No. No Meat
Not
Hook
this time. Even then, the castle just kills you, right? Oh, no, you would gain a
yeah.
bunch of life. Oh, that would have been insane. So Trail of Crumbs does make a food. You can sack it.
I don't see enough damage coming through here.
We're not seeing it here, yeah.
No.
Wow. Great fight here from Karl Sarap in game number 2. It felt
We're going
like
to game 3.
he had a pretty good draw in game 1, and he was nastily outclassed here by Stefan. And it looks like game 3 is upon us. And there's a concession there.
Oh, man.
Oh, I spoke a little too soon. He pump faked me. There we go. Now we're going to get a game 3 between these two. And now Stefan really has to be feeling the heat. And make no mistake, Karl as well.
For all the marbles here. For
So
Stefan.
many marbles at play. If you're
All
just
of
joining
them.
us, thanks for tuning in. And I'll remind you of the stakes as these players do their sideboarding. Stefan Schütz here on the bottom started off 7-0. The wheels have come off a bit here in day 2, but with a win, he would move to 11-4. We're predicting that multiple 11-4 players will make it into the top 8 here. If he's one of them, and he is likely to be if he wins here because of his great start, that affects your tiebreakers positively, then he could get into top 8 of this event and the World Championship based off of this game that we're about to watch. On the other side, Karl Sarap is 10-4 and has medium tiebreakers, which could definitely still mean a win and in for him for top 8. He's in a win, and cross your fingers, but still, this is massive. How's the hand look here for Stefan?
Oh, Stefan's on 6. He's mulliganed. There's an oven. There's a goose. Needs this hand to develop a bit. Karl Sarap does have a portable hole to deal with that oven. Or potentially this goose.
Collected Company, Inquisitor Captain. There's an Adeline off the top now for Karl. That is a heavy hitter hand if he can hit his land drops.
Oh, man. Now, Karl, yeah, like you mentioned, that's big for him, right? He's got all the action. Just needs to hit land drops 3 and 4 to unload that hand because Stefan is down to 2 cards.
That's right. Is this a land? No, it's a Skyclave Apparition.
Has one
and
more
that is
turn, though.
uncastable. He has to hit a land next turn. Castle Lochthwain here for Stefan. And he, okay, he can Maelstrom Pulse or Lurrus here. He's just going to go for Lurrus.
Land. Karl?
Yes,
okay,
it's a plains
he's
off
in
the
it.
top for Karl Sarap. Oh, that was huge.
I mean, everybody wants to see a real match of Magic played right here for all the marbles. So
everybody except for Stefan.
Of course.
Okay, there's Fatal Push.
Yeah, so that is a way to get the Adeline off the battlefield.
That's right.
You can eat a food with the goose or gain some life. You could also just cast Maelstrom Pulse here. You could also sacrifice the goose after adding mana, Fatal Push to Adeline, play Lurrus, and then play goose again.
Yes.
I think he's got the mana for all of that.
I'll tell you what, Karl Sarap is using up his 1-times on a land off the top here. I mean, if he finds a land... Now, look, he's got plays if he doesn't, so it's not like it's over.
Yeah.
But Inquisitor Captain into Collected Company?
I mean, this is the ideal hand here. This is the type of hand that you need if you're Karl to win this matchup, right? Multiple 4-drops, multiple apparitions. Oh, and I think he's doing the thing.
He is, and there's the Fatal Push. He liked your line, Paul.
Oh, but choosing to hold off on the push.
Okay.
And we're going to see something go into the oven, probably. Actually, I wonder if Stefan's interested in making a 3/3 and killing the apparition. Looks like he's not.
Yeah, he's just going to sacrifice it in response. That gets him his fatal push active and another land off the top.
This Castle Lochthwain's going to have to do some work now, right?
And there's a Temple Garden for Karl Sarap. That is exactly what he needed to see. And yes, Castle Lochthwain, desperation time for sure for Stefan Schütz here. He has to start finding action because it is going to get nasty from Karl's side. He's got 2 4-drops to play off of this Temple Garden, and they are the 2 best cards in his deck. There's Inquisitor,
right.
Captain.
What do we find? All right.
Oh, an Adeline. That has to be the best hit as well.
I don't think you're going to...
Karl.
Oh, attacking with Apparition, because Stefan can activate Hive of the Eye Tyrant here. That would prevent him from drawing a card, but it would eat the Skyclave Apparition.
Stefan has to make a very tough decision here between getting a creature off the board now.
Or it's, do I need to just find a Meathook Massacre here? Would he rather draw the card? Then that's what...
It may already be to that point, and he is going to go ahead and draw his card. He's got Witch's Oven in hand. He can soak up 1 damage with the Goose. 2 damage gets in. It's not the end of the world. And that's not a Meathook Massacre off the top, Paul. This is starting to get very tight here for Stefan.
Yeah, and we're going to see a Pulse on the Adeline here. Into the Oven. No cat, though. Could stay alive by sacrificing some food.
You know it's getting tight when that happens.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, activating Castle Lochthwain against the humans deck.
Right.
That's not really where you want to be.
Right. Not only is the life loss tough, but the mana that you spend means you're not doing things that affect the board, and that can put you way behind as well. It is double bad.
But, you know, he's got no other choice, right?
Right. Okay, there's Maelstrom Pulse to take care of the Adeline. So right now he's facing down 6 power. Oh, another Inquisitor,
another Captain.
This is how you do it, Karl.
Oh my!
And Stefan has to be shaking his head here. It has been heavy
Lieutenant?
hitters.
Ranger Captain.
Wow.
That's the one, because now, I mean, there's so much pressure on the battlefield.
Yes.
Karl can choose to play around Meathook Massacre here.
He can sacrifice Ranger Captain of Eos on Stefan's upkeep. That will prevent Stefan from casting non-creature spells this turn. And if the only way that he can get out of this is Meathook Massacre, that could lock up the game here for Karl, as well as the match, and maybe even a top 8 seat for him.
All right, so we're looking to pump up our life total here a little bit.
Yeah, sacrificing a food to sacrifice a food, as it turns out.
So now that he's at 20, I don't know if Karl's going to sacrifice the Ranger Captain.
Right, he's down to
Meathook
15.
would be fantastic. Oh, okay.
Cauldron Familiar gives you a chance. Remember, he has Witch's Oven in hand number 2 and a food to get started.
Okay, so that it starts with the cat. We got the oven here, so that's a double drain, right? That's 2 more life for Stefan, along with a block. Now, Karl does have a Skyclave Apparition.
Yeah, he's got 2 of them.
But Stefan isn't just dead right now.
Karl has an incredible hand here. Double Skyclave, Thalia Guardian Thraben, Collected Company, Giant Killer, and he drew an Iganjo for the turn as well. His first order of business, though, send him in. Everybody is attacking here.
So we're going to see a Lochthwain activation. Oh, no. Hive. Okay.
Okay, so Stefan's changing gears here.
Now, Karl does have an Iganjo.
Mm-hmm.
To kill the Hive if he so chooses.
Stefan's going to try to eat a Skyclave Apparition. It's worth noting that this apparition doesn't have anything under it. Here's Collected Company, though, with blocks having been done.
Double Ranger Captain.
Wow! Now he can certainly start sacrificing those. That's right.
No meat hooks for you ever.
And Karl's not running out of gas.
Not at all.
Not this game. He picks up a pair of Esper Sentinel. Now, he didn't get the +1/+1 counters from Thalia's Lieutenant or something like that, so the Skyclave Apparition will die, but I think he'll be just fine with what he found. Double Ranger Captain. He now has 3 of them on board, and he can just start throwing them on upkeep and saying, Stefan, you don't get to cast anything but creatures the rest of this game, and if that's the case, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think, what are we looking for Stefan? Perhaps a ravenous squirrel, right? That's one of the better creatures you can draw, but keep in mind, double Skyclave Apparition, Giant Killer. Karl might just play Giant Killer and just start sacrificing a bunch of Ranger Captains to prevent a meat hook.
I'm thinking Stefan's looking for a power outage in Estonia. That's where Karl's from, and it's not feeling like he has any outs that are magic related at this point.
Oh, man.
I mean, we've seen this deck do crazy stuff before. It's foolish to call it out before it's done, but how is he going to get back into this game facing down that much power and not being able to cast non-creature spells on his turn? Yeah, they're huge. He's keeping his life total up admirably, but next turn's really bad.
He gave him a draw there. Maybe thinking he needs a little more pressure before he can afford to sacrifice those Ranger Captains.
Perhaps eyeballing a victory this next turn.
Now if that was an untapped land, you could have gotten rid of both of the Witch's Ovens.
Yes. He'll have to start chipping away at them now, though. He can use... He also could remove the Gilded Goose. Start getting blockers out of the way, depending on how aggressive he's feeling. All right, it's going to be the oven.
Yeah, but because if somehow Stefan just finds ways to survive a bunch of attacks, I mean, there's a lot of draining happening here, so want to keep those ovens in check.
Definitely. 2 food, 2 Cauldron Familiar in the yard, and everything in the red zone again here for Karl Sarap. He lost game 1, won game 2, and now he has dominated game 3 against his teammate.
And are we activating again the Hive?
It does seem so, Paul.
Looks like it, yeah.
Probably doesn't feel like he's got much of a choice. This is not a lethal attack thanks to the blockers, but he probably feels like he needs to make some headway here.
Is it eating an Esper Sentinel? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, or he could trade for a Ranger Captain.
Right. But given that there's 3 in play...
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
2 is better than 3 from Stefan's side of things.
Sack a cat. Take 7.
Ouch.
Now are we going to see some sacrifices?
I mean, his hand is so great. He also is going to have Cave of the Frost Dragon down this turn.
Right, because you can go Thalia or double 1-drop.
Right. And if you do that, I'd assume that Ranger Captain... I mean, he knows he's just stone top decking here, right? Like, he doesn't have any way to get through his library. If he activates the castle, that's it. He's not going to be able to cast anything relevant anyway.
With the tower in play and the familiar, a top deck meat hook, you could cast a meat hook for 4 and destroy the entire board.
Be pretty bad for Karl. I mean,
even
he
with
does
the
have ways to
play,
get through.
You can still meat hook for 3. So I feel like we're going to see a Ranger Captain. I mean, this is how Karl loses, right?
Right. That's what I'm thinking too. Let's see if he goes for it on upkeep. He's got a stop set.
I think he's got enough in play
there
now.
It is.
All right, yep.
This is it. Stefan does not have any more runway. Finds another Hive. That's rough.
And is this it? We have a Cauldron Familiar. Can block one of the 3/3s. You can actually... So you have 3 blocks total next turn, so you're not just dead. Even if Karl activates the flyer, you would take a total of 9 damage. Mm-hmm. But but you can activate the hive, gain some life, and sack a food if you have to. Oof.
Yeah, this is just about it here for Stefan Schütz. He is facing down immense pressure. Karl had that huge sweat off of keeping the 2-lander, needing to hit land drops 3 and 4 in short order. And he did, in fact, back-to-back turns.
Yeah, I think maybe if Stefan could have found something like a fatal push this turn, right, to help set up the meat hook, that could have been great for him, right?
Yeah.
Use that fatal push, get this other Ranger captain off the battlefield, put yourself in a position to top deck meat hook. But as is, it just seems like Karl just has way too much here.
Right, even just surviving the turn is difficult.
Although it's interesting because Karl this turn might not attack with the Ranger captain, right? It's the last one that he has.
Is it at risk though?
Well, there's a. Oh, excuse me. There is not a hive. It traded, of course, in the last turn.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
and the new one's tapped. So yeah, he can jam.
Yeah. No, he can attack. Never mind. I thought that there was a hive still in play. Okay.
So this is going to force the issue now. Skyclave Apparition targeting Witch's Oven. And if Stefan wants to do some activations of that, he's going to have to do it now.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a Castle Lochthwain activation somewhere in the mix to try to find a fatal push again. After some blocks, sack
that
to the Phyrexian Tower, play a fatal push.
And then cold top deck, Meat Hook Massacre.
Look, I mean...
Hey, I like it, Paul. You're finding every little edge you can here. And Stefan's going through the exact same thought process that you are.
What an impressive showing, though, this Humans deck. I know we've had previous tournaments where Humans was a deck to beat even, and a lot of people came prepared, but I think the metagame shifted in a way where people were not ready necessarily for this matchup.
Yeah,
maybe
when you catch
playing
people wrong-footed with this deck, it goes very well for you.
Yeah, maybe a couple of removal spells or sweepers people weren't playing.
Okay, so Stefan taking a look at the situation here. He has Cauldron Familiar and a food. He has the Goose.
So you have the Cauldron Familiar. You can return to Cauldron Familiar, block with the Familiar and the Goose, make a food, sack the food to gain 3 life.
13 at that point?
Could go up to 13. And he's looking at 9 damage here, potentially, if he blocked the biggest creatures.
Seems like that's the best he can do. He has no cards in hand, so the castle... I mean... You know, you start to get into desperation mode and think, okay, well, I could either lose here or activate castle, hit something like fatal push and maybe survive, but he probably has enough wiggle room here to just get a draw step.
I don't know. I mean, maybe you do have to Lochthwain. Maybe that's the only way you can possibly win.
Because of Ranger Captain.
Because of Ranger Captain is you castle Lochthwain. Draw a card. No, he's not. Okay.
It's hard to imagine him winning, right? It's really hard to imagine him winning.
He can still do it here.
Okay. Because
Although
of Phyrexian
I think he's
Tower.
just gaining life. Yeah. Yeah. So at this point, I mean, I think
down
Karl
to
just
2.
Yeah, Karl just has to have this locked up, right? I mean,
Feels
all
like
you
it.
do is sack Ranger Captain,
Yes.
play out my hand, go.
Yes, and you can see that he's going to do that, by the way. He just played both of his last 2 cards because Ranger Captain says these are going to be on the battlefield by the time it comes back to me. And it doesn't feel like there's any outs left here. And it's Thoughtseize, insult to injury. He's already on 2 life. And he's going to have to give the good game to Karl Sarap, who picks up an epic victory here in round 15 over his teammate Stefan Schütz. He's going to feel, hey, you know, I'm sorry. I know how much you had on the line, but Karl Sarap is live for top 8 here. And remember, if you make top 8, you have a shot at top 6. And if you have top 6, it could be Karl who walks away from this match having won this and parlayed that into a world seat as well. So Huge victory here for Karl Sarap, and he's got a big sweat coming up here, Paul, because his tiebreakers were in the middle. He's by no means locked to make top 8 with a victory here.
Yeah, no, and it would feel doubly awful, right? If if you won this match and did not top 8, and you knocked your teammate out of potentially Worlds and also top 8.
So bad. All right, they're still playing for some reason. Good games were exchanged, but we're still battling here.
Taking game actions.
Certainly a lethal attack here from Karl, though. And Stefan's going to go to the bitter end, but that'll do it. First strike damage from Thalia Guardian of Thraben finishes things off for Karl Sarap.